see you guys in the dark.
This happened almost 4 years ago in the early hours of New Year's Day. For reference, I was 17 at the time, and in my senior year of high school. I'm a male, and I'm about 5'10", weighed about 160 pounds at the time. I lived in the suburbs, and I was at a New Year's party being held by my friend at his house, which was a 20-minute walk away from my house. It was about 1 in the morning, and I was about to leave with another friend of mine who lived on the same block as me. My friend who was hosting the party asked if we would like a ride home, and in hindsight, we probably should have accepted his offer. But our neighborhood was pretty safe, and we figured that with the two of us walking together, no one would bother us. Plus, there were probably other people at the party who needed a ride home more than we did. We said our goodbyes to everyone and began to walk home. The road was predictably empty with no one but us walking along the sidewalk, and maybe the occasional car passing by us. It was pretty well lit, though, so we weren't walking in complete darkness. My friend wanted to pick up a pack of cigarettes on the way home, so we stopped off at a gas station along the way. When we got to the gas station, it was nearly empty, with only a woman at a pump filling her car up with gas, and a guy posted up in front of the store on his phone. We went inside, and my friend picked up a pack of cigarettes. We walked out of the store. My friend immediately lights the cigarette. We reach the sidewalk, and we hear someone behind us yell, "Hey, wait!" We looked behind us to see the guy who was in front of the store quickly walking towards us. He looked to be in his early to mid-20s. He was probably about 5'8", maybe 140 pounds from the looks of him. He approached us and asked if he could get a light. My friend and I didn't think much of it, and he lit the guy's cigarette. The guy thanked him, and my friend said that you're welcome. We began walking home when the guy continued to follow us, asking where we were going. We told him we were heading home, and asked him where he was going. He said his friends were at a party, and he was heading back over there as he left to get some fresh air for a little bit. He asked us if we wanted to come to the party. This is officially the point where red flags start going off with this guy. Why the hell would a guy in his 20s ask two teenage boys if they wanted to go to a party with him? We told him bluntly that we didn't even know who he was, nor did we know anyone at the party he was talking about, so we weren't going. He starts laughing and says that we seem pretty cool. He told us that we needed to let loose a little bit. My friend and I told him that we were 18 and 17, respectively, to see if maybe that would get him to leave us alone. He chuckled and said that age didn't matter to him, and that he had a brother who was 16, and that he partied with him and his friends all the time. Jesus Christ, can this guy not take a hint? We were just a little less than 10 minutes away from our houses, and we didn't want this creep following us all the way there. I told him firmly, "Dude, we're not going anywhere with you. Now quit following us and just fuck off." He gets livid and starts screaming at us for being unfriendly, inconsiderate assholes, and that he was just trying to be nice. He then starts throwing racial slurs at my friend. It's probably worth mentioning by now that I'm white and my friend is black. My friend yells at him to get away from him before he cracks him in the face, and the guy proceeds to run away from us. My friend and I look at each other in complete disgust over what happened and spent the next 5 minutes walking and talking about that creepy guy. We both agreed that he was probably drunk or high from the New Year's party. Next thing we know, we hear a car behind us and proceed to slow down to match our pace. We see the windows rolled down, which revealed the guy we had just seen a few minutes earlier with who we presumed to be two of his friends. One of which was a man who was probably the same age as the guy, and a woman in the back seat who had to have been in her mid-30s. The guy tells us that we got off on the wrong foot and asked us once again to join them at the party. My friend and I look at each other, and I whisper to him that we needed to get away from them. My friend tells them that we're not going with them and to just leave us alone already. The guy was silent for a few seconds and says, "You're coming with us, one way or another." They pull over and quickly get out of the car, which caused my friend and I to immediately go into flight mode. We turned right on a side block, and my friend yelled, "Run to the park. We'll lose them in there." We looked behind us, and to our horror, the three people were running right for us. We run into the park, and we once again look behind us. They're getting closer. We run into the dark, thick patch of trees that covered a good portion of the west side of the park, hoping to evade them. I was panicking at this point because I didn't see a damn thing, and I was worried that my friend and I would trip over something and get captured by one of those sick freaks who wanted to do who knows what with us. We hear one of them trip and fall behind us, yelling, "Fuck!" And luckily we see light again. We made it to another path in the park, and we made a left onto that path. We heard yelling behind us, and one of the guys said that they lost us. The woman yells to split up and search around the park for us. We bolt towards the bathrooms, which thankfully were open, and we hide inside. We took a minute to catch our breath, as our lungs were practically burning at that point. We should have called the cops and just hid until they got there, but at the time we were so focused on getting the hell away from those crazy people that we decided to try and make our way to the nearest exit out of the park and run to my house. We waited for about 2 minutes, and we bolted out of the bathroom and towards the park exit. Shortly before we exited the park, we heard one of the guys yell behind us that he found us, and we were getting away. We looked behind us to see the guy in the distance, starting to chase after us. We ran until we reached my house, and I quickly opened the door. We ran inside. I quickly locked it. We went into my living room and collapsed on the couch. We both sat there silently, trying to regain our energy and calm down after what had happened, hoping they didn't see where we ran to. I looked out the window several times over the course of 10 minutes, and thankfully, they never showed up again. We talked about it, and we are glad that we both are okay, and that nothing bad happened to us. We were trying to figure out what they wanted with us. Did they want to kill us, rob us, have sex with us? God only knows. My friend hung around for another half hour before he insisted on heading home. He left, and then I went to bed. I kept thinking about what had happened, and pondered on what could have happened if they caught me. Even as I'm typing this, I still have those thoughts. I eventually fell asleep, and I woke up, told my parents what had happened. They were thankful that my friend and I were okay, but were upset with us that we chose to walk home and should have accepted the lift from my other friend, or even called them and they would have picked us up. Regardless, we filed a police report. I gave them all the information that I could. Unfortunately, we never heard anything about it again. And I wonder sometimes what they've been doing ever since. I really hope they never harmed another person after that. I can't express enough how thankful I am that we managed to get away from those freaks. And to this day, this incident is still the scariest thing that has ever happened to me in my life. This incident definitely made me more weary of my surroundings, and I try my best to avoid situations where I need to walk late at night. Whether by myself or not, I don't know what could have happened had those people got their hands on me. But I do know one thing. I never want to meet those people ever again.
The night that we met was supposed to be the night that I killed myself. It was a cool fall evening, just warm enough for a light jacket. I was at a horse sale that I went to every month. Per usual, my friend and I checked out the tack lots and horses that were up for auction. Throughout the past few months, I had dealt with a lot of pain and hardship. My heart was as broken as it could be. All of my passion for the things that I enjoyed was gone. The girl that I once knew wasn't there anymore. I walked a long, dark road of depression, alone. I had no self-esteem anymore. I felt I was worth nothing. I planned to end it all after the sale. I was watching horses in the outdoor ring when one caught my eye. My friend was looking for a horse, and it seemed like it might be a match for her. I slipped into the ring to talk to the owner. When he turned around and looked at me, it was like the world stopped turning. The horses around me were in slow motion. Our eyes met, and every bone in my body went cold. I asked to try the horse out. He let me. Later on, my friend bought the horse. In the end, the horse didn't work out, but that's another story for another time. The owner was supposed to deliver the horse to them the next day. I didn't catch his name. I couldn't sleep that night, but the fact was, I was still here. I had to find out who that guy was. The next day I was out fishing on a river with my brother when my friend texted me his name, Matt. She had written a check out to him, so it all worked out. It wasn't long before I found him on Facebook, and it wasn't long before he messaged me and asked me on a date. I'll never forget that day. I spent the next week or so house-sitting for a high school friend. I invited him over for dinner towards the end of the week. I'd never been so nervous in my life. I had no idea what I was getting myself into. I made shrimp pasta and vodka sauce that night. We clicked. He ended up letting me take his truck for a spin. When we got back to the house, we were sitting in the dark, talking, when he pulled me in for our first kiss. My heart had melted. I remember my eyes filled with tears because it all felt so right. I swore for so long that it was right. He stayed with me until 5 a.m. He was allergic to cats, otherwise he would have just stayed the night. The next few months seemed to be of pure bliss. The sex was phenomenal. The money that he blew on me, spoiling me, was crazy. I got everything that I could ever want. His family was loaded, and he wasn't afraid to show it. It wasn't until the honeymoon phase was over that I started noticing things. An ex-girlfriend reportedly texted him and told him that he had given her chlamydia. He then gave it to me. I was never skinny enough. My hair was never the right color. I didn't have any tattoos. I only had a few piercings. I was a waitress, drove a truck. I posted too many selfies. I texted him too much. I couldn't satisfy him anymore. He began dropping me off at the gym to work out while he ran errands, just about every single day. He became even more obsessed with porn than normal. A Tumblr blog, the whole 9 yards. He killed all of my hopes and dreams, one by one. If we were to be together, I could never ride racehorses for a living like I had wanted to my whole life. He started spending hours on end playing video games when I came over. He had used me for what he needed, and he was done with me. He taught himself how to build computers. He started building guns in the basement and fabricating and 3D printing some of his own parts for them. That should have been a red flag. About a month went by of him ignoring me, him telling me that I wasn't enough, and showing me pictures and videos of girls that he actually wanted. He told me that my family hated me. Everyone hated me. I became depressed once again. I started working more and more hours just to keep myself from thinking. One night I had finally had a mental breakdown. I told him about the night that we met, what I was supposed to have done that night, how he had saved me, and how much I loved him. His answer? He left me. The next morning he woke up and texted me saying that he had no feelings for me and I could come get my things. My world had fallen apart. I lost 25 pounds. I didn't eat for weeks. My parents became very concerned and didn't let me close my door. My dad got me a job riding racehorses. It started to look up. About a month later, I landed myself in the ICU with a severe concussion. When I woke up, I thought Matt and I were still together. I got on my phone to tell him that I was hurt when I saw the messages from the breakup. I fell apart again. A whole year had passed. I remained single. Matt had a few girlfriends. Somehow, I managed to keep myself together. At least it looked like that. I worked myself to death, bought a new car, and moved out at 20. I worked 2 jobs and about 75 hours a week. I kept myself pretty busy. I had my own Adderall, alcohol, weed cocktail that kept myself afloat. I'll be the first to admit that the drinking did start to get a bit out of hand. I was at my parents' visiting when I got a friend request from Matt on Facebook. I must have refreshed the page 10 times. I couldn't believe what I was seeing. Despite my better interest, I had accepted it. He messaged me a little while later. He had made it through the police department and was now a county sheriff. He gave me a pretty lame apology, but I somehow accepted it. I knew in my heart that I wasn't over him. Not one bit. He took me to dinner that night and spent the night at my apartment. He actually made some good points about why he ended it with me. I started to forgive him. I shed a lot of tears that night. We started hanging out like old times again, but the same problems started to arise. Once again, I wasn't good enough for him. But there was something different about him this time. He became obsessed with picking locks. We'd be laying in bed watching a movie, and he'd be on his phone watching lock-picking videos. He complained about my dog a lot. He always joked that he would go missing one day. A few more weeks went by. It seemed like every once in a while his mask would vanish, but just for a second. I should have known that something was off when he sent me a text complaining about somebody dying in his arms at work. The body stunk, he said. He started driving like a nut. I vividly remember us going 163 miles per hour on a back road in his Mustang. He watched my reactions the whole time. He hardly looked at the road. We went to New York City for a few days. He took a gun into one of the World Trade Centers and got us kicked out. We got into a fight over the phone one night because he called me an explicit name. The next day, we met up to talk. During my drive to the meeting place, I was overwhelmed with a feeling of dread. I knew it was the end of us, but it was more than that. I wasn't sad. I was just frustrated. We talked for about 20 minutes, and I don't think his eyes ever wandered from my face. His two dark brown eyes shot through me like bullets. He started talking through his teeth, telling me that no one would ever love me, that he was in cahoots with my friends, and that they hated me too. I was going nowhere in life. The hair on the back of my neck stood up. His eyes were completely dead. It's something that I can never unsee. The way he was looking at me just gave me chills. The voice in my head started talking. Steph, get out of the car. Get out of the car now. I trusted my gut and got out. I hurried to my car, jumped in, and immediately locked it. I saw him staring at me in my rearview mirror. I drove straight to my parents' house, bawling. They were terrified. The next day, my boss told me that Matt had apparently been driving back and forth past my work, going outrageous speeds, almost like he was showing off. But the fact was, he lived almost an hour from there and had no reason to be there. I reported him to his precinct, who said that they could take care of it. I didn't hear from Matt for a very long time. I started to move on and feel like I was myself again. Finally, I started dating my current boyfriend. For the record, he is the best and most loving man that I've ever met in my life. Matt drunk texted me one night. I told him to just leave me alone. I had since moved an hour away since we broke up. I had started to feel safe yet again. One night my boyfriend was on his way over when he called to tell me that somebody had been tailgating him for 30 minutes. It was Matt. He made it almost to my house before he finally turned off. I have seen him a few times since, but thankfully he has kept his distance. He's now a Department of Transportation cop, and how funny it is that my now fiancé drives a tractor trailer.
This happened back in the early days of my childhood. I was maybe 12 years old at the time, living just outside of a major city in Australia. It was Christmas Eve, and unlike other countries who have their white Christmas, Australia's Christmas is smack dang in the middle of summer. So the last place that you want to be is indoors, unless for some reason your house has an air conditioner, which 90% of the households do not. Since it was Christmas time, school kids were on school holidays, so I invited a friend over and convinced my dad to drive us to a swimming pool complex. It's a pretty large place, with cheapish food and a huge water slide. So naturally, we were pretty content staying the entire day there, spending our parents' money and enjoying the cool water. It started getting later in the day, and we were told that we had to go soon. We begged and pleaded to stay a little bit longer, which led to a compromise that we would have to walk home if we didn't want to leave now, which we actually have done a couple of times before since the pool complex wasn't too far from my house. We agreed and said that we would be home soon. It didn't actually take us too long before we wanted to leave since the sun was setting and the pool was getting a bit too cold for comfort. We placed towels around our dripping bodies, waved goodbye to the staff at the entrance of the pool, and began the trek home. It usually didn't take us all too long to get home, but today my friend had the brilliant idea to take a shortcut, which in turn actually ended up taking us twice the amount of time to get anywhere near my house. He then joked, saying, "At least we know for next time." I called him an idiot and said that we better be home by dark. So we were now getting really close to my house, and it was in fact dark out by the time. My phone was flat, so I was trying to speed walk as fast as I could, so I knew my parents would be wondering where we were. This shortcut we were on took us through some very dark and isolated streets. The suburban roads were narrow with streetlights stretched apart, leaving long, dim spaces of darkness. This was when we heard a car pull into our street. It was about 100 meters behind us. As it got closer to one of the streetlights, we could see its rusty blue van. And wait for it, covered in Christmas decorations. We immediately laughed and exchanged peculiar glances. Our faces turned to a more perturbed nature when the van started slowing down as it approached us. We heard a husky voice call out to us. I didn't quite hear what he said, but he was clearly trying to get our attention, and he definitely had it. We finally got a look at this guy, and wow, The smell was the first thing to hit our noses. Try to imagine rotten bananas mixed with a heavy scent of alcohol. I don't know why I said bananas, but that's honestly what it smelt like. He was wearing a Santa hat and asked us if we'd been good this year. He then reached into the back of his van and pulled out a red box that had been wrapped like a Christmas present. He then gestured for us to come closer. We said we really needed to be going, as our parents would be wondering where we were. He then pulled the greasiest smile that I've ever seen and offered to give us a lift to our house, and not to his torture chamber. This guy must have been pretty intoxicated to think that this was going to work on us. We said no thank you, as our house was just a few blocks over, and sped up our pace. We thought that this would make this guy go away, but he slowly cruised on the right side of us, trying to persuade us to get into his van, saying that he got loads of presents in the back, and that he doesn't know what to do with them. My friend started getting a little impatient, and told the guy that we didn't want his greasy presents. This seemed to piss him off, and he told us that we'd be on Santa's naughty list. He then drove 10 meters in front of us, swung his passenger door open, and said, "Look, the present is in the seat if you want to take it. You take it, I don't mind." We were now staying as far away from this guy's van as possible, staying off the path and onto people's lawns as we were walking. When we reached the point where we'd be walking past the van, I shit you not, we heard someone sneeze from the back of the van. My eyes looked into his, and I just pulled out my phone and said, "I'm calling the police." He spat on the ground in front of us, and then sped off down the road. We then bolted down a side route I knew took me directly to my house. Our adrenaline kept us fueled enough to run all the way home. When we got to my driveway, we agreed not to tell my parents, as they wouldn't let us go out at night again if they knew what had happened. I kind of wanted to tell him, but my friend insisted that we should keep it quiet and never take that shortcut ever again. We never saw the man again, and hoped no one fell for those presents he was offering. So, greasy Santa guy in the white van, let's not meet again. The family that I babysat for needed me to work while the mother was in her office working with her clients. She would still be home at the time, just not able to take care of her kids. The kids were 6. We'll call this one John, and 4. We'll call this one Colin. My job was to keep the children alive and entertained. One day the mother told me that I could take them out back, let them use the trampoline. While jumping, Colin accidentally hurt John, who then hit Colin back. I warned John not to do it again, but he did it, twice. I grabbed John, told him that he was going to have time out. I had him put on his shoes while I spoke to Colin. I explained to Colin that I would be right back, and looked directly at John. John was about halfway back to the house when he realized that I was not with him. He immediately sprinted into the house, locked the door right behind him. At this point, I was sprinting around the house to the other door that I knew was open. I jumped inside the door to see John nearly make it in time to lock the door. He proceeded to scream like a burning banshee. I grabbed him, and I take him to his room. All the while, he screamed for his mother, that he knows is in the room right across the hall. I brought Colin inside and had him color downstairs. Within about 5 minutes, I heard the upstairs door open. John was leaving the room. I went to go check on him. He saw me, screamed, ran right back into his room, and slammed the door. This happened at least 5 more times, one in which he actually locked himself in the bathroom instead of his own room. Eventually, his mother had came out, explained to him that I am in charge, and he needed to apologize to me and to Colin before he could even leave his room. He cried, ran right back into his room. The mother went back into her office, and then continued to work. Half an hour later, I hear the door open once again, and John walks downstairs and started playing with Colin. I asked him what he was doing. He acted like nothing had happened. I asked him if his mom wanted him to do anything. He said no. I told him that I heard everything. He screamed and then ran back into his room. For the next hour, he disguised himself as a pirate, a pumpkin, a trash can, and a woman named Jill, trying to sneak out of his room. This continued until he stepped out of the room where I was waiting for him just inches outside. This time he got a little creative and tried to push me aside. He sprinted forward, tripped, and then fell into a basket. He was screaming and crying louder than anything that I have ever heard. His mother then stepped out, apologized, paid, and then sends me home. I had babysat for this family many times before. Half the time, shit like this would happen. I have not babysat for them since. Basically, it was just some crazy kids who tried to fool his mom to disguise himself as a pumpkin and walking like he was in Scooby-Doo. My old roommate's dad was a former naval officer and then an FBI agent. 20 years in the Navy and 12 to 15 years or so in the FBI. One of his strangest stories was from his FBI days. I'll paraphrase it below. A kidnapping case. This girl disappeared from her grandparents' RV sometime between 5 p.m. and midnight. They were up front. Next thing they know, she's gone. She was supposed to be sleeping in the back. One stop at a rest stop, and they were in stop-and-go traffic, so they figured that she must have popped out of the door at some point. This is near the California-Nevada border. So we meet them, talk to them. This is within about a day or so, and the girl's still missing. There's no sign of her. She happens to be 15. Local PD theory is she ran off because she's 15 and wants to get away from her lame grandparents for the summer. But there's a busted window, glass inside the vehicle. So we're treating it like a possible kidnapped person. After a few hours, there's a couple different theories on the case. One is that she ran off, another that she got snatched. Nobody's seen the girl in almost 2 days now, and disappearing in the desert for a young girl is tough. Next thing you know, we get a phone call. Naked girl, lost and confused, picked up by some trucker on a 2-lane road out there called Nipton. Runs into I-15 between Barstow and Vegas somewhere. Right near the border. Matches the description. Me and the 3 other guys head out there to meet with the sheriff who's got her. Turns out she's the girl. She's just fine. No rape, no bruises, no exposure, nothing. Completely healthy, completely fine. Even cleaned like she took a shower. Won't tell us a single thing. She doesn't remember a damn thing either. According to her, one moment she's in the RV, the next she's naked walking down the side of the road in 100-degree heat. We talked to her for 2 hours while the grandparents headed out to go pick her up. We had our social services lady talk to her. There was nothing. I've seen people hiding things. She definitely wasn't hiding anything. She honestly didn't remember. Damnedest thing, anyway. The girl was found. She was fine. So we turned it back over to the local PD to figure out what happened and determine if charges were pressed and all. I kept in touch with a guy I knew there because I was curious, and we were in a fantasy football league. A few months later, he tells me the parents sent the girl to a therapist to look for repressed memories, to make sure that she wasn't raped or something. Therapist says that she seems pretty fine, but honestly has no recollection of her time at all, and doesn't think that there's any point to delving much further, since she has no symptoms and is largely more confused by the reaction than the event. So to this day, we've got a busted RV window with glass on the inside, likely from a moving RV on a jam-packed freeway, likely in broad or lightly fading sunlight, with 0 witnesses. A 15-year-old girl gets out, or is taken out, and is taken somewhere safe nearby for almost 2 days, then is stripped naked without being touched sexually, cleaned up, and deposited on the side of the road separate a few miles away. She didn't have a drug in her system that we could detect. She remembers nothing at all. Nobody knows what happens to her clothing or anything else. It's been almost 20 years since this has happened, and I can't figure out what the hell went on with that girl. Still bugs me at night that I have no way to explain it aside from she lied the whole time. But I know liars, and I'd bet money that she wasn't lying to us at all.